Hey guys, Lucas Garvey here, and today I'm going to be discussing a book to be considered Stanley Kubrick's Bible. And I say that because allegedly he had this book with him while shooting all of his great pictures. And I believe starting from Paths of Glory, he had this book with him while shooting every day for inspiration and guidance while making his movies. And the book I'm referring to is Film Technique and Film Acting by V.I. Pudovkin. If you don't know Pudovkin, he's an old school Russian filmmaker. And when I say old school, I mean like really old school. Like we're talking like 1915, 1920, like 100 years ago level of old school. But yeah, so today I'm just going to be going through this awesome book and just discussing some of the things that Pudovkin touches on in the book. And there's a lot of things that, have probably been fully integrated into film knowledge and maybe aren't as interesting to talk about, so I might just skip over those. But I think there's a lot of stuff in here that really people take for granted and don't appreciate. And he phrases stuff in the most simple and brilliant way imaginable, right? And if Stanley Kubrick read this book all the time, it's probably worth reading. It's probably pretty awesome. So sit back, relax, and let's talk. Also, quick side note, I'm only going to be discussing the first half of this book, Film Technique. The second book, which is on film acting, I'm not going to talk about. If you like this video, leave a like, leave a comment, and I might do a second part talking about film acting. So one of the awesome things that Pudovkin touches on in this book is the idea of not showing things as such. And what I mean by that is, let's just say someone stubs their toe in a scene, right? Pudovkin argues that filming in a way in which it's just a static camera and you just show the actor stubbing his toe and he, screams in agony or whatever, that is the worst possible way that you could film such a scene, right? And he would argue what you want to do is you want to chop it up into pieces and construct something that creates the image in the audience's head without just giving it to them. So, with this toe stubbing example, maybe instead of just, a wide shot of him stubbing his toe, it's, a close-up of his toes hanging out of his flip-flops, and we see the camera zooming towards the object of contact, whether it's a coffee table, whatever it may be, and we see the toe swinging, and then we cut to his face of pain and agony in the face of and we see the effect of the toe stubbing. So instead of one action of him swinging his foot and stubbing his toe, the scene then becomes multiple separate actions that don't even show the stubbing of the toe, but it shows all the orbiting satellite actions around that. And the audience views and witnesses these satellite actions, and it creates a far more powerful central point of gravity that's incredibly compelling. And I love that idea. I think it's so cool, and I think it's exactly right. And, not to throw some shade, but people really like Oneers. I don't know if they're as popular now as they were like a couple years ago. But there was a point in time when everyone was crazy about Oneers. Every movie that had a Oneer, people always talked about it. And when I say a Oneer, I just mean a continuous shot that could be 3, 4, 5 minutes, and it's just one long take, or at least has the appearance of a long take. And while they're very technically impressive, like they're really complicated to pull off, and it's unbelievably impressive in that sense, I've always found that the Oneer has it removes the whole purpose of cinema. Right? Because, like as Pudovkin says, instead of just showing the one thing, which is maybe something more akin to like a painting, right? You create energy and momentum and power by editing and juxtaposing different objects, right? And the one I always felt removed that. And that's not to say that one is always bad. The longer that an edit is not used, the more impactful the next edit can become. So if there's no edit for 5 minutes, then that next edit can be really impactful. Now, that's usually not the case. Usually the one just ends. But sometimes, there are ones that use that anticipation of the edit very effectively. So that's an awesome little tidbit of information that Pudovkin talks about. Just don't show the central action. Show the orbiting satellite actions to the audience, so then the central point is imagined by the audience. And typically that is a way stronger effect, and it's very, very cool. This next section is likely my favorite part about this entire book, and I think it is so true and so correct, and lots of filmmakers miss it, and I think it's incredibly cool. And this next section is about the plastic image. If you remember one thing about this video, it would be the plastic image. And Pudovkin actually has a fantastic paragraph that I'm just going to read off, where he kind of talks about the plastic image and its importance. The novelist expresses his keystones in written descriptions, the dramatist by rough dialogue, but the scenarist must think in plastic, externally expressive images. And to briefly aside, that word scenarist that Pudovkin uses, now please know that this is before dialogue in movies. This was during silent films when this was written. So a scenarist could be someone who writes the treatment, right? It's the person who lays out the building blocks of the story. You know, Sally goes to the store, Jim goes to this, then this happens. So it's just the rough outline. So whenever you hear the word scenarist, just think the guy writing the treatment and the rough outline of the story. The scenarist must train his imagination. He must develop the habit of representing to himself whatever comes into his head in the form of a sequence of images upon the screen. Yet more, he must learn to command these images and to select from those he visualizes the clearest and most vivid. He must know how to command them as the writer commands his words and the playwright his spoken phrases. So what does he mean by that, by plastic images? It's similar to show, don't tell. Now, I know what you're thinking. Lucas, show, don't tell is the most basic, completely understood concept, allegedly, in filmmaking. Everyone knows it. Everyone's heard that phrase. What's so special about plastic imaging? The plastic image, thinking in that way, it forces you to develop the habit of working with as concrete and specified pictures as you can imagine. So, for example, there's a lot of the show, don't tell examples that are very blah, that are very, John's back home and, the camera pans across a lot of pictures of the family and their life and kind of shows what they do. And that sucks. I'm just going to be honest. And I'm sure that there's a million examples of movies that just pan across a bunch of photos to tell you what's going on, who's who, who's mom, who's dad, what the roles are, all that stuff. And that's just telling at the end of the day. It's vague. There's nothing specific. There's nothing hard hitting about it. Whereas with a plastic image, right, it's one singular point. It's a one-dimensional identifiable object. So let's just say, for example, you had two people that were great friends. They'd been friends for years. And this is the opening scene and they're interacting with each other. How would you tell the audience, or, how would you tell the audience that these are friends without just coming out and saying it, right? So you could do the show, don't tell, where, you pan along the series of photos on the desk that shows them in college and shows them partying and shows them, at the beach or whatever, having all these pictures that show the relationship. Or you could develop a plastic image. That could be, John gives Carl his keys to his car, right? That instance is a plastic image. It's a one singular unified action. It is John giving Carl his keys to his car. And you can make it like a Maserati or a Porsche or something super cool, so it's more weighty, right? You go from the show, don't tell, which is this kind of vague, superfluous idea, like, oh, they're friends, to, oh, John will give his car to Carl. They must be super buddy-buddy, right? So it's really about being as clear and concise as possible with the imaging. Now, that's a very uninspired and uncreative idea, that plastic image. So, and he kind of, Pudovkin talks about this, the scenarist has to go through and maybe develop 10 plastic images and then select the most powerful one. That's the most vivid and the most alive. So, maybe he gives him his car, or maybe he stops a bullet for him, jumps in front of him and stops a bullet, right? That's kind of obviously, overdone. But, it illustrates the same point, right? So the scenarist's real main focus should be the ability to develop these plastic images in his mind and then selecting the greatest plastic image of the bunch. The same way that, a writer will write 10 different pieces of dialogue and then pick the best one, or the same way that, an author will describe a meadow 10 different ways and then pick the best one. It's a similar kind of process, but with filmmakers, it's the plastic image. And, if you just think about Kubrick, going back to tell the video, like, my God, like every movie of his has concrete plastic images, whether it's the twins in The Shining, or it's the blood coming down the elevator. Like those things are concrete, because you just got to think about it. If you just swapped out those plastic images for mundane plastic images, the movies would be terrible, like in The Shining, because like what's the blood in the elevator supposed to represent? This place is haunted and full of woolly ghoulies is the idea, right? Imagine if there was just a ghost, or there was just spooky sounds, So a poor choice in plastic imaging can greatly affect a movie, right? Because like we all love the blood in the elevator. But yeah, so that's kind of the gist of the plastic image idea. So really, plastic imaging is the way to go. If you only remember one thing about this video, I would make it plastic imaging. I think it's the coolest way to think about movies, and just even when you're writing or filming, like concrete plastic specified images are the way to go. This next section is less a technical analysis, more so a interesting experiment that Pudovkin did with editing. He was really at the forefront of the technology, and he actually did lots of experiments with editing just to see how people would react to the form. So I just want to read a little section where he talks about this experiment he did with a colleague, Kuleshov. We chose close-ups which were static and which did not express any feeling at all. Quiet close-ups. We joined these close-ups, which were all similar, with other bits of film in 3 different combinations. In the first combination, the close-up of the actor was immediately followed by a shot of a plate of soup standing on a table. It was obvious and certain that the actor was looking at the soup. In the second combination, the face of the actor was joined a shot showing a coffin in which lay a dead woman. In the third, the close-up was followed by a shot of a little girl playing with a funny toy bear. When we showed the 3 combinations to an audience which had not been let into the secret, the result was terrific. The public raved about the acting of the artist. They pointed out the heavy pensiveness of his mood over the forgotten soup, were touched and moved by the deep sorrow with which he looked on the dead woman, and admired the light, happy smile with which he surveyed the girl at play. But we knew that in all 3 cases, the faces were exactly the same. So this is rather interesting. So he did this experiment where he used the same footage, but by editing different clips, it completely changed the tone of the image and of the acting and of the scene. I think that experiment speaks for itself. I don't know if I really have to add too much to it. It really just shows the immense power of editing, and just how by cutting to a shot of a coffin, an actor looks more sorrowful. And if you cut to a girl playing, the actor looks more happy. Or the opposite could even be true, where you can do juxtaposition, where if an actor looks terribly sad and then cut to a happy girl, it could make the separation more distinct. But when it's kind of vague, the audience might perceive it as more similar than not. So just a super interesting experiment. I just want to talk about that. Very, very cool. So this next section is about Pudovkin's view on the use of music in film. And I think his comments on the use of music don't just apply to music, but they apply to pretty much every aspect of film and the director's role in bringing all these disparate pieces together. So on music, Pudovkin says, music, I maintain, must in sound film never be the accompaniment. It must retain its own line. So what does Pudovkin mean by this? He's saying that music shouldn't just imitate what's going on screen. So if things are exciting, it shouldn't just play exciting music. If things are sad, it shouldn't play sad music. If it's scary, it shouldn't play scary music. And it can line up on occasion. You could reach a point where you could save that for certain parts of the film. But if during the entire motion picture, the music is constantly an accompaniment of what's on screen, then it just comes off as very shallow and weak. For example, and this is just my opinion, I find that a lot of horror films have this problem where they come off as very one-dimensional and flat. The actors act scared, the music is scary, it's lit scary, it's shot scary, it's edited in a scary way, the sets are scary. Every piece of the puzzle is stacked identically to kind of just convey scary. And you could argue, or I think some people would argue that's good, that a director that can line everything up like that and bring all the pieces into sync and produce one one idea of being scary is good. I would argue that's not the case, in my opinion. I think film is akin to an orchestra piece where you have the cellos and the violins and the basses and all the different instruments, and they're all doing their own thing, right? You know, the bass is maybe playing at a slower tempo than the violins, and like it's everything needs its own unique character. You know, if you were listening to a song in which every instrument was playing the exact same notes and the exact same timing and the exact same, it was all the same, it would just be flat and meaningless, right? There would be no juxtaposition, no contrast. And you could save it, and maybe at the very end of the symphony, you could have everything come together in one final hurrah and then end it. But if an entire symphony was composed like that, it would be horrific. It would just be incredibly boring. Pudovkin also says that music should be often used as a counterpoint. So, just playing the music, having it almost be the exact opposite of what's actually going on screen, which, this is a relatively common practice now, so I'm not really going to go too deep into it. I think most people know examples. Like, for example, Clockwork Orange, when he's singing in the rain while he's, beating the old couple. Like, that's obviously an example of using a music as counterpoint to the image. Try to create counterpoint, try to create contrast, and think of it as a symphony where the music's one instrument and the images are one instrument and the acting's one instrument and the actual rhythm of the edit's one instrument, and you're just trying to, instead of just syncing them all up into one linear thing, try to break it out and see if you can do anything kind of interesting with the way it goes back and forth. So those are the major things in this book that I thought were really interesting and I got a lot from, and I just thought were really cool. There's a lot of stuff that I completely skipped over. So if you liked what I talked about, if you're still watching this video, I would highly recommend going out and picking up this book. It's absolutely fantastic. If you like this video, leave a like, leave a comment down below, and let me know if you want to see part 2 where I discuss the film acting portion of this book. And yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. I hope you loved it. If you have any thoughts or comments or anything, please leave a comment down below. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.